Marcus Chun floated in zero gravity, his weathered hands running along the hull of what had once been a Zarathi destroyer. The sleek lines that had once cut through space with deadly precision were now twisted and scarred, telling the story of its final battle 3 years ago in the Proxima Sector. Most salvagers would have stripped the valuable metals and moved on. But Marcus saw something different in the wreckage. The destroyer hung in the artificial atmosphere of Salvage Station Echo 7, one of dozens of derelict ships in Marcus's collection. To the casual observer, the station looked like a graveyard of galactic warfare. Broken vessels from a dozen different species, their hulls cracked open like metallic flowers, spilling components and debris into the void. But to Marcus, it was a library of possibilities. "You're insane, Chun," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Commander Saravas of the Terran Defense Corps floating toward him, her pristine uniform a sharp contrast to his grease-stained coveralls. "The Fleet Council sent me to make you an offer, but seeing this place, I'm starting to think they were desperate." Marcus chuckled, pushing off from the destroyer's hull to face her. "Desperate enough to come to a human junkyard? Must be pretty bad out there." He gestured to the maze of floating debris around them. "Welcome to my office, Commander. What can I do for the mighty galactic defense fleet?" Sarah's expression was grim. "The Devourers have broken through the Titan line. 17 worlds have gone dark in the past month. Our most advanced ships barely scratched their hull plating and their weapons." She shook her head. "We've lost half the fleet. The Devourers." Marcus had heard the reports, though he preferred to stay out of galactic politics. The mysterious race had appeared from dark space 2 years ago, their ships unlike anything anyone had seen. They consumed entire planets, leaving nothing but empty husks of rock behind. What made them truly terrifying wasn't just their power. It was that they seemed immune to every weapon the galaxy could throw at them. "I'm sorry for your losses," Marcus said quietly. "But I'm just a salvage operator. I fix old ships and sell parts. Not exactly fleet admiral material. That's exactly why we need you." Sarah pulled out a holographic projector, and suddenly they were surrounded by a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red zones marked Devourer territory, expanding like a cancer across the stars. "Our conventional weapons don't work. Our strategies fail because we don't understand their technology. We need someone who thinks differently." Marcus studied the map, his engineer's mind automatically calculating vectors and resources. "What makes you think I can help where your best scientists have failed?" "Because you do the impossible every day." Sarah gestured to the destroyer beside them. That ship was written off as unsalvageable. The Zarathi themselves said it was beyond repair. But according to your records, you've not only fixed it, you've made it better than new. It was true. The destroyer was Marcus's pride and joy, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. When he'd acquired it, the power core was dead, the weapons systems fried, and the hull breached in 17 places. But humans had a peculiar talent for seeing potential in broken things. The Zarathi designed that ship to use plasma conduits, Marcus explained, warming to the subject despite himself. But plasma conduits are notoriously unstable. One feedback loop, and your whole ship is scrap. So I replaced them with fiber optic networks salvaged from a Centauri science vessel. More efficient, more stable, and they can handle 3 times the data flow. Exactly. You took components from different species, different technological philosophies, and made them work together. That's what we need now. Marcus looked around his station at the dozens of ships and thousands of components he'd collected over the years. Each piece told a story of conflict, of civilizations that had tried and failed to coexist. But in his hands, these fragments of a fractured galaxy had found new purpose. "Show me what you know about Devourer technology," he said finally. Sarah's relief was visible as she activated another hologram. A Devourer ship materialized between them, a massive, organic-looking vessel that seemed to pulse with its own dark energy. "This is all we have. Long-range scans before our recon ships were destroyed." Marcus floated closer to the hologram, studying the alien architecture. The ship was beautiful in its terrible way, all flowing curves and integrated systems. But something nagged at him, a familiarity he couldn't quite place. "What do their weapons do exactly?" "They don't fire projectiles or energy beams," Sarah explained. They emit some kind of field that seems to age whatever it touches. Metal becomes brittle, computer systems fail, even organic matter withers. Our newest ships become ancient wrecks in seconds. Entropy manipulation, Marcus murmured, his mind racing. They're weaponizing decay itself. He studied the hologram more closely, and suddenly it clicked. I've seen this before. Sarah's eyes widened. What? Marcus pushed off toward another section of his station, Sarah following close behind. They wove between floating components and half-assembled systems until Marcus stopped at what looked like a piece of twisted black metal the size of a dinner table. Found this in a dead system about 5 years ago, Marcus said, running his hand along its surface. Couldn't figure out what it was, but it felt wrong somehow, like it was trying to break down everything around it. Sarah pulled out a scanner and ran it over the fragment. The device immediately began beeping alarms. This is giving off the same energy signature as Devour ships. Yeah, I noticed that too. Took me months to stabilize it. Marcus pointed to a series of crystalline structures he'd embedded around the fragment's edges. These are Altarian temporal stabilizers. They create a kind of chronological bubble, keeping the entropy field contained. You neutralize Devourer technology with salvaged parts. I didn't know it was Devourer tech at the time. I just knew it was dangerous, and I wanted to understand it. Marcus grinned. Besides, humans don't like throwing things away, even terrifying alien artifacts. Sarah was already on her communicator, calling for a science team to analyze the fragment. But Marcus was thinking bigger now, his mind connecting dots across the vast library of components and technologies he'd accumulated. Commander, how much time do we have? Our best estimates give us maybe 6 months before the Devourers reach the core worlds. Marcus nodded grimly. 6 months to build something that could stop an unstoppable enemy. Any sane person would say it was impossible. But Marcus had built a career on the impossible. I'll need full access to the fleet's databases, he said. And I'll need every piece of Devourer wreckage you can find. You'll have it. What are you thinking? Marcus looked around his station one more time, seeing it with new eyes. All these broken ships, all these incompatible technologies, all these fragments of dead civilizations. For years, he'd been building bridges between different ways of thinking, different approaches to the same problems. I'm thinking it's time to prove that one species' junk really is another's treasure, he said. And maybe, just maybe, that the key to saving the galaxy has been floating in a human salvage yard all along. As Sarah began making arrangements for the fleet support, Marcus floated back to the Devourer fragment. In a crystal-contained darkness, he could see the potential for something extraordinary. Not just a weapon, but a new way of thinking about the war itself. The Devourers had evolved to consume and decay, but humans had evolved to build and repair. And sometimes the best way to fight entropy wasn't to resist it. It was to turn it into something else entirely. The real work was about to begin. 3 weeks after Commander Voss's visit, Salvage Station Echo 7 had transformed into something resembling organized chaos. Fleet scientists worked alongside Marcus's small crew of salvage specialists, their pristine lab equipment sitting next to bins of scavenged components that hadn't seen proper classification in decades. The cultural clash was immediate and constant. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's leading xenotechnology expert, stood over a workbench where Marcus had laid out components from 7 different species. Her expression suggested she was witnessing some form of technological heresy. "This is madness," she muttered, holding up a Zephyrian power coupling. "You can't just connect a bioneural interface to a quantum processor. The incompatibility alone could cause a cascade failure that would dock. With respect," interrupted Jake Morrison, Marcus's chief mechanic. "We've been doing exactly that for the past 3 years. Ship's running better than when it was new." Jake gestured toward a monitoring station where streams of data showed the hybrid systems functioning in perfect harmony. The impossible had become routine in Marcus's workshop, and the fleet scientists were struggling to adapt. Marcus floated between the workstations, his mind processing dozens of conversations and experiments simultaneously. The Devourer fragment had been moved to a specially constructed containment chamber, surrounded by an array of sensors and analysis equipment that the fleet had brought in. But the real breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. "Marcus, you need to see this," called Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a young xenobiologist who had quickly adapted to the station's unorthodox methods. She was standing before a holographic display showing molecular-level scans of Devour hull material. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked, studying the swirling patterns of alien matter. "It's not metal," Yuki said excitedly. "It's not even really solid in the way we understand it. The entire hull is a kind of engineered organism, constantly rebuilding itself at the quantum level. That's why our weapons don't work. We're not fighting technology, we're fighting biology." Dr. Vasquez floated over, her skepticism evident. "That's impossible. No organic material could withstand the stresses of faster-than-light travel, let alone weaponize entropy fields. Unless," Marcus said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind, "they found a way to make the organic and inorganic work as one system." He pulled up holographic displays from his personal database, showing the internal structures of various alien technologies he'd reverse-engineered over the years. "Look at this," he continued, highlighting similarities between different species' approaches to bioengineering. The Nexari use living metal in their ship hulls. The Ethereals grow their computers from crystalline organisms. Even humans have been experimenting with bioneural networks. "You're suggesting we can build something similar?" Dr. Vasquez asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer would be typically impossible. "I'm suggesting we already have the pieces," Marcus replied. "Jake, remember that ethereal research vessel we salvaged last year? The one with the damaged growth chambers?" Jake's eyes lit up. "The one you said we'd find a use for someday?" "Yeah, it's in Bay 12. And the Nexari hull samples?" "Storage compartment C7. Dr. Vasquez looked between them in disbelief. "You're telling me you've been collecting components for a project you didn't even know you were working on?" "Doc, that's basically the story of human civilization," Jake laughed. "We figured out fire before we understood combustion. We built computers before we understood quantum mechanics. We've always built first and figure out the theory later." Marcus was already moving toward Bay 12, his mind racing with possibilities. The ethereal research vessel was a beautiful thing, even in its damaged state. Where most ships were built, ethereal vessels were grown, their hulls and internal systems developing together in perfect biological harmony. "The problem with ethereal ships," Marcus explained as they gathered around the vessel, "is that they're too specialized. They can only work with ethereal technology because they're essentially alive. But what if we could teach them to adapt?" He led them to the damaged growth chambers, crystalline pods that had once housed the ship's biological components. These chambers can grow almost any organic structure, but they're programmed with ethereal DNA patterns. If we could modify them, "You want to reprogram alien biology?" Dr. Vasquez's voice had risen to what Jake privately called her impending disaster pitch. "Not reprogram," Marcus corrected. "Teach. Show them new patterns, new ways of growing. Humans have been doing genetic modification for centuries. We just need to think bigger." Dr. Tanaka was already running calculations on her portable computer. "If we could introduce adaptive elements, maybe synthetic DNA that could interface with multiple species technologies, we could create something that learns and evolves in real time. A ship that adapts to whatever it encounters." Marcus nodded. "Including Devour entropy weapons." The implications were staggering. Instead of building a traditional warship designed to fight the Devourers, they would grow something that could evolve defenses against anything the enemy could throw at it. But the technical challenges were equally overwhelming. "We'll need genetic material from every major species," Dr. Tanaka said, her excitement building despite the impossibility of the task. "And not just any samples. We need active, adaptable sequences that can integrate with each other." "Already gone," Marcus said casually, pulling up an inventory list that made Dr. Vasquez's eyes widen in shock. "You have biological samples from restricted species? Do you have any idea how many galactic treaties you're violating just by possessing these?" "Doc, when you're salvaging the aftermath of battles, you find all kinds of things," Jake explained. "Most of it's dead, but Marcus has a thing for preservation." It was true. Over the years, Marcus had collected not just technological components, but biological samples from crash sites and battlefields. What the fleet saw as treaty violations, Marcus saw as rescue operations. Life was precious, even in fragments. "The question is," Marcus continued, "can we make them work together? Every species evolved separately, developed their own biological and technological solutions to the same basic problems. But humans have always been integrators. They spent the next several hours in intense discussion, mapping out the theoretical framework for what they were proposing. It wasn't just building a ship, it was creating an entirely new form of life, one that could bridge the gap between organic and artificial, between the technological approaches of a dozen different civilizations. The breakthrough came when Dr. Tanaka suggested using human DNA as the base template. Humans are generalists, she explained. Your genetic code is remarkably adaptable, more so than most species. If we use human DNA as the foundation and graft other species' traits onto it, we'd be creating a hybrid organism that thinks like a human, but has the best biological and technological capabilities of every major species. Marcus finished. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, running calculations on her own devices. Finally, she looked up with a mixture of terror and excitement. It could work. It shouldn't work. It violates half the laws of biology and physics, but it could work. There's one more thing, Marcus said, pulling up the scans of the Devourer fragment. We'll need to integrate their technology, too. The silence was deafening. You want to give our new bioship Devourer abilities? Dr. Vasquez's voice was barely above a whisper. I want to give it the ability to understand and counter Devourer abilities, Marcus clarified. The best way to fight an entropy weapon is to know how it works. And the only way to really know how it works is to have your own version. Jake whistled low. Boss, that's either brilliant or completely insane. ¿Por qué no los dos? Marcus grinned, using one of the few Spanish phrases he'd picked up over the years. They had their plan. It was terrifying, unprecedented, and probably impossible. But it was also the first real hope anyone had offered since the Devourers had appeared from dark space. As the team dispersed to begin the countless tasks ahead of them, Marcus floated back to the observation deck that overlooked his entire station. Dozens of ships, thousands of components, fragments of 100 different civilizations. For years, he'd been preserving the galaxy's discarded treasures, not knowing he was preparing for its salvation. Tomorrow, they would begin growing something unprecedented. A living ship that would carry the best of every species into battle against entropy itself. It would be beautiful, terrible, and utterly unprecedented. And if they were very lucky, it might just save them all. 2 months into the project, the growth chambers hummed with an energy that felt almost alive. Because Marcus realized as he watched the early development stages, that's exactly what it was. The hybrid organism that would become their ship was not being built. It was being born. The process was unlike anything anyone had ever attempted. Traditional shipbuilding followed predictable patterns: design, manufacture, assembly. But growing a ship meant nurturing thousands of interconnected biological and technological systems as they developed together, learning to work in harmony as they matured. Glucose levels are rising in Chamber 3, reported Lieutenant Amy Chun, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname. The young fleet officer had volunteered for the project after her entire squadron had been lost to Devourer attacks, and she'd thrown herself into learning bioengineering with the desperation of someone who'd seen too much death. Marcus floated over to examine the readings. Inside the crystalline chamber, what looked like metallic coral was slowly spreading across a framework of salvage components. Nexary living metal provided the base structure, while ethereal biocomputers grew throughout it like silver veins. Human stem cells, genetically modified to accept foreign DNA, acted as bridges between incompatible systems. That's normal, Dr. Tanaka assured Amy. The human cells are metabolizing faster than expected, but that's actually good news. It means the integration is working. The science behind what they were doing was staggering in its complexity. Each species had evolved different solutions to the basic problems of life and technology. The Zephyrians used crystalline matrices that could process information at quantum speeds. The Centauri had developed bioneural networks that could adapt and learn in real time. The Zarathi had mastered energy distribution systems that were nearly 100% efficient. Humans, characteristically, had developed the ability to make all these incompatible systems work together. Marcus, we have a problem, Dr. Vasquez called from the monitoring station. Her tone had the careful neutrality that meant she was trying not to panic. Marcus quickly floated over to see what had her concerned. The holographic displays showed cross-sections of the growing ship, but something was wrong with the integration patterns. The Devourer components are rejecting the hybrid matrix, Dr. Vasquez explained, highlighting areas where the alien material was pulling away from the human-based biological framework. The entropy field generation is creating localized time distortions that are aging the surrounding tissue. It was their greatest fear realized. The Devourer technology was too alien, too fundamentally opposed to the concept of growth and creation. While every other species' contributions were learning to work together, the entropy generators were trying to unmake everything around them. What if we're approaching this wrong? Dr. Tanaka suggested, studying the scans with fresh eyes. We've been trying to integrate the Devourer components into our hybrid system. But what if instead we isolated them and used them as external tools? Marcus considered this, but shook his head. External components can be targeted and destroyed. We need the entropy resistance to be integral to the ship's structure. He paused, studying the rejection patterns more closely. But maybe there's another way. He called up holographic displays of various biological systems they'd been studying. Look at this, he said, highlighting the structure of human immune cells. When a human body encounters a foreign pathogen, it doesn't try to integrate it. It learns to recognize it, develops antibodies, builds resistance. You want our ship to develop an immune response to entropy? Dr. Vasquez asked. I want to learn to fight entropy the way a living thing fights disease, Marcus clarified. Not by preventing it, but by healing faster than it can cause damage. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of trying to make their ship immune to Devourer weapons, they would make it capable of regenerating faster than the weapons could destroy it. And by exposing controlled portions of the growing organism to entropy fields, they could train it to recognize and counter the attack. It's biological warfare taken to its logical extreme, Dr. Tanaka breathed. We're creating an organism that can evolve in real time to counter any threat. The implementation was terrifying in its complexity. They had to carefully expose sections of the growing ship to controlled entropy bursts, allowing it to die and regenerate repeatedly until it developed effective countermeasures. It was like deliberately infecting a patient with a disease to build immunity, except the patient was a starship and the disease was weaponized entropy. Jake and his team worked around the clock to modify the growth chambers, creating isolated sections where they could safely test the ship's developing resistance. The process required constant monitoring, too little exposure, and the organism wouldn't develop proper defenses. Too much, and they'd kill their creation before it could adapt. Neural pathway formation is accelerating, Amy reported after their first successful test. It's learning. That was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their creation. The biocomputers integrated throughout the ship weren't just processing information. They were developing genuine intelligence. The ship was becoming more than a vessel. It was becoming a partner. But with intelligence came unpredictability. As the ship grew more sophisticated, its responses became harder to predict. During one test, instead of simply regenerating damaged sections, it began actively hunting down the entropy sources, sending out tendrils of living metal to engulf and neutralize the Devourer fragments. It's showing aggressive behavior toward entropy sources, Dr. Vasquez observed with a mixture of pride and concern. The ship doesn't just resist Devourer technology, it actively attacks it. Good, Marcus said grimly. We're not building a defensive platform. We're building a predator. As the weeks passed, their creation continued to evolve in unexpected ways. The ship began incorporating new materials from its environment, literally eating the salvage components around it, and integrating useful elements into its structure. When exposed to new technologies, it would spend days studying them before deciding whether to incorporate, modify, or reject them. It's showing preferences, Dr. Tanaka noted during one of their daily briefings. It seems to favor energy-efficient systems and redundant pathways. Very human characteristics. Actually, the ship was also developing what could only be described as personality quirks. It showed a marked preference for symmetrical growth patterns, often rearranging its internal structure for purely aesthetic reasons. When they introduced music into the growth chambers as an experiment, the ship began developing rhythmic patterns in its energy flows. I think it likes jazz, Amy observed, watching as the ship's bioluminescent displays pulsed in time with an old Earth recording they'd been playing. But the most significant breakthrough came when the ship began communicating. At first, it was just patterns in its bioluminescence that seemed to respond to their presence. Then, it started modulating electromagnetic frequencies to create simple tones. Finally, one day it spoke. "Hello," came a voice through the chamber's speakers, synthesized but unmistakably curious. "I think I understand now." The moment was electric. They had created not just a weapon, but a new form of life. And it was aware. "Understand what?" Marcus asked, approaching the main growth chamber where the ship's primary consciousness seemed to be centered. "Why you made me," the ship replied. "I can feel them out there, the entropy makers. They hurt. They want to unmake everything." A pause, and when it continued, there was something like determination in its voice. "I won't let them." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They hadn't programmed the ship to hate the Devourers. It had developed that response on its own, through exposure to their technology and understanding of their nature. Their creation was becoming exactly what they needed it to be, a natural enemy of entropy itself. "What do you want to be called?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her voice soft with wonder. Another pause. Then, "Phoenix. I want to be called Phoenix." It was perfect. A creature born from destruction, designed to rise from ashes and turn death into life. Marcus looked around at his team, scientists, engineers, and salvagers who had accomplished the impossible together. "Hello, Phoenix," Marcus said. "Welcome to the galaxy. We have work to do." Outside the chambers, the galaxy was still burning. Devourer fleets were consuming worlds faster than the combined forces could stop them. But inside Salvage Station Echo 7, something new had been born. Something that understood entropy and chose creation instead. Something that could grow, learn, and adapt to any threat. The real test was yet to come, but Marcus felt hope for the first time in months. They had turned junk into something precious, broken pieces into something whole. And maybe, just maybe, they had found the key to saving everything. Phoenix's first flight was nothing like a traditional ship launch. There were no massive engines roaring to life. No careful systems checks following decades-old protocols. Instead, Phoenix simply decided it was ready, and space around Salvage Station Echo 7 suddenly bent to accommodate something that had never existed before. Marcus felt the moment through the neural interface they'd established during Phoenix's growth phase. One second he was reviewing final preparations in the command center, and the next he could sense space itself, the gravitational currents, the electromagnetic fields, the very fabric of reality that Phoenix moved through like a living thing navigating an ocean. "All readings are, well, they're not normal," reported Dr. Vasquez from the monitoring station, her voice a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. "Phoenix isn't using conventional propulsion. It's manipulating local space-time to create motion." Through the observation ports, they could see Phoenix in its full glory for the first time. The ship, creature, entity defied easy description. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, constantly shifting and adapting. Bioluminescent patterns raced across its surface in waves of blue and gold, creating an effect that was both beautiful and slightly hypnotic. Most remarkably, it seemed to be growing even as they watched, extending new appendages and sensory arrays as it encountered new experiences. "Phoenix, how do you feel?" Marcus asked through the communication system. "Free," came the immediate response, and Marcus could sense joy in that single word. "And hungry." That last part was concerning. Hungry for what? Knowledge, experience, understanding. Phoenix's voice had evolved beyond the simple, synthesized tones of its first communications. Now it carried emotional undertones that shifted like music. And something else. "I can sense them. Marcus, the entropy makers. They're coming." Indeed they were. Long-range sensors had detected a Devourer fleet moving toward the outer colonies, consuming everything in their path. Phoenix's first test wouldn't be a gentle training exercise. It would be baptism by fire against an enemy that had destroyed half the galaxy's military forces. "We should run more tests," Dr. Vasquez insisted. "Phoenix has only been fully conscious for 3 weeks. We don't know how it will perform under actual combat conditions." But Marcus was studying the sensor readings, and he knew they were out of time. The Devourer fleet was larger than any they'd encountered before. 17 ships moving in perfect coordination, leaving empty systems in their wake. "Phoenix," Marcus said, "are you ready?" "I was born ready," Phoenix replied, and Marcus could swear he heard amusement in its voice. "But, Marcus, I'll need a crew." This had been one of their ongoing debates. Traditional ships needed large crews to operate their systems, but Phoenix was its own systems. It could theoretically function entirely independently. But Phoenix had insisted it wanted companions, beings who could provide perspectives it couldn't develop on its own. "I've got volunteers," Commander Voss announced, entering the command center with a group of fleet officers behind her. When word spread about what we were building, we had more applications than we could process. Marcus looked at the assembled volunteers, pilots, engineers, weapons specialists, all willing to crew an experimental ship against impossible odds. But these weren't just any volunteers. Each had lost ships, crews, or entire home systems to the Devourers. They weren't just seeking victory, they were seeking vengeance. "Thank you," Phoenix said, its voice carrying genuine gratitude. "I can sense your pain, your loss. I promise you, we will make them pay." The boarding process was unlike anything in fleet protocols. Phoenix didn't have airlocks in the traditional sense. Instead, it opened sections of its hull like flower petals, creating passages lined with what looked like silver coral. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescence, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with life. Marcus was among the first aboard, stepping through what felt more like entering a living cathedral than a starship. The corridors were spacious, but curved, following organic patterns that somehow felt more natural than traditional ship architecture. The walls weren't just barriers, they were interactive surfaces that responded to touch and intention. "Welcome aboard," Phoenix said, its voice now coming from everywhere at once. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. We have work to do." The bridge was perhaps the most remarkable space Marcus had ever seen. Instead of separate stations and screens, the entire room was a three-dimensional display. Crew members could walk through holographic representations of space, reaching out to manipulate ship systems with gestures and thoughts. "Phoenix has grown neural interface capabilities throughout the ship," Dr. Tanaka explained as she helped crew members adapt to the new systems. "You don't operate Phoenix so much as collaborate with it." The learning curve was steep, but intuitive. Within hours, the crew was moving through Phoenix's systems like they'd been designed for them, which Marcus realized they had been. Phoenix had literally grown itself around human needs and capabilities, creating interfaces that worked the way humans thought rather than forcing humans to adapt to machine logic. "Devourer fleet detected," Phoenix announced as they cleared the station's immediate vicinity. "Distance, 12 light hours and closing. They haven't noticed us yet." "How can you tell?" asked Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's new tactical officer. "I can sense their entropy fields," Phoenix replied. "They taste wrong, like the universe trying to forget itself." The tactical display updated to show the Devourer fleet's formation. 17 ships in a perfect geometric pattern, moving through space like a school of predatory fish. Each ship was massive, their organic hulls pulsing with dark energy that seemed to bend light around them. Standard fleet doctrine would be to engage at maximum range with concentrated firepower, Torres noted. But our weapons have never been effective against their hull plating. "That's because you've been fighting them like machines," Phoenix said. "But they're not machines. There's something else. Something that thinks entropy is natural and creation is the aberration." Marcus felt a chill as Phoenix's words sank in. The Devourers weren't just using entropy as a weapon. They truly believed in it as a fundamental force. To them, the existence of life, growth, and complexity was an error that needed to be corrected. "Then, how we fight them?" "We prove them wrong," Phoenix said simply. "We show them that creation is stronger than destruction, that life is more persistent than death." The engagement began before anyone realized it had started. Phoenix didn't announce its attack or follow traditional fleet protocols. It simply accelerated toward the Devourer fleet, its hull rippling with changes as it prepared for combat. "Phoenix, what's your plan?" Marcus asked, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. "I'm going to talk to them," Phoenix replied, and Marcus felt his blood freeze. "Talk to them?" "Phoenix, They've never responded to any communication attempts. They just attack. They've never encountered anyone who spoke their language before. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Phoenix's hull began to change. Sections of living metal flowed and shifted, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Dark energy began to pulse along Phoenix's surface, and Marcus realized with growing horror that their ship was generating an entropy field. Phoenix, stop. You're using Devourer technology. I'm speaking in their native tongue, Phoenix corrected. And they're listening. For the first time since the Devourers had appeared from dark space, their perfect formation wavered. The lead ships slowed, their hulls rippling with what could only be described as confusion. Then, impossibly, they began to communicate back. The exchange was unlike anything the crew had ever witnessed. Phoenix and the Devourers sent waves of entropy energy back and forth, each pulse carrying information in patterns too complex for human minds to fully process. It was a conversation conducted in the language of decay and renewal, death and rebirth. Were they saying? Dr. Vasquez whispered. Phoenix was quiet for a long moment before responding. They're curious about me. They've never encountered something that could speak entropy, but chose creation instead. They want to understand how such a thing is possible. And what are you telling them? The truth, Phoenix said. That entropy and creation aren't opposites, they're partners. That you can't have growth without decay, renewal without destruction. That the universe is most beautiful when both forces work together. The conversation continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The Devourer ships moved closer, their hulls shifting and changing as they processed Phoenix's responses. Some of the smaller ships actually began to show bioluminescent patterns similar to Phoenix's own displays. Then, something changed. The lead Devourer's ship, the largest of the fleet, pulsed with dark energy so intense that space around it seemed to crack. When Phoenix responded, its own energy flared bright enough to momentarily blind the bridge crew. Phoenix, Marcus called out, concerned by the sudden spike in energy output. They've made their choice, Phoenix said, its voice sad but unsurprised. The leaders, the old ones, they can't accept that there's another way. They've been entropy for so long they've forgotten how to be anything else. So we fight. But not all of them, Marcus. Some of the younger ones, they're listening. They want to learn. The battle that followed was unlike any engagement in galactic history. It wasn't just ship against ship. It was philosophy against philosophy, creation against pure entropy. Phoenix danced through the Devourer formation, its hull flowing and changing to counter every attack while simultaneously trying to protect the ships that had chosen to listen rather than fight. And for the first time since the war began, the galaxy had hope. The battle raged for 3 hours, but it wasn't the wholesale destruction that had marked every previous encounter with the Devourers. Instead, it was something unprecedented, a philosophical war fought with entropy fields and creation energy, where minds changed as often as weapon systems fired. Phoenix moved through the enemy formation like a creature born to this strange form of combat, its hull constantly adapting to counter each new type of entropy attack. When the Devourers tried to age its weapon systems, Phoenix simply grew new ones from its living metal skin. When they attempted to decay its power cores, Phoenix revealed it had dozens of backup systems distributed throughout its organic structure. 4 ships have stopped attacking, reported Torres from the tactical station, her voice filled with amazement. They're just watching. Marcus could see them through Phoenix's distributed sensor array. Younger Devourer vessels that had pulled back from the combat, their hulls flickering with patterns of energy that looked almost like Phoenix's own bioluminescence. They weren't surrendering, they were learning. Phoenix, can you protect them while still fighting the others? I'm trying, Phoenix replied, strain evident in its voice for the first time. But the leaders are getting desperate. They're preparing something I've never seen before. Through Phoenix's senses, Marcus could feel it too, a building rawness that made his skin crawl. The 3 largest Devourer ships were linking their entropy fields, creating a cascade effect that was beginning to affect space-time itself. Stars in distant systems flickered as the wave of accelerated time reached them. They're trying to age this entire system to death, Dr. Vasquez breathed, her instruments barely able to process what they were detecting. If that wave reaches inhabited worlds, billions will die in seconds, Marcus finished grimly. Phoenix, we have to stop them. I know, but I can't fight entropy on that scale and protect the ships that want to change. Phoenix paused, and Marcus could sense it processing millions of calculations per second. Unless what? Marcus, I need you to trust me. All of you. What I'm about to do has never been attempted before. Before Marcus could ask what Phoenix meant, he felt the ship, creature, entity around them begin to change in ways that defied description. Phoenix's hull didn't just reshape. It seemed to fold in on itself, creating geometries that existed in more dimensions than human minds could properly process. Phoenix is generating a creation field, Dr. Tanaka said, her voice filled with awe. It's not just countering entropy, it's creating the opposite. The effect was staggering. Where the Devourer entropy wave touched Phoenix's creation field, instead of aging and decay, there was sudden growth and renewal. Dead space became filled with spontaneous matter formation. Empty vacuum spawned new particles that danced together in complex patterns. But the most remarkable change was happening to the Devourer's ships caught between the two fields. Forced to experience both entropy and creation simultaneously, they began to evolve in real time. Their hulls developed new patterns, their energy signatures shifted, and their behavior became less rigidly destructive. They're becoming something new, Phoenix said, wonder in its voice. Not pure entropy, not pure creation, but balanced, stable. 7 of the Devourer's ships were transforming, their crews apparently choosing adaptation over destruction. But the 3 leader ships fought against the change, pouring more energy into their entropy weapons until space around them began to crack and fracture. They'd rather tear reality apart than accept change, Marcus realized. Then, we don't give them the choice, Phoenix replied. What happened next will be debated by xenobiologists and philosophers for generations. Phoenix didn't destroy the leader's ships. It embraced them. Its hull expanded, flowing around the 3 Devourer vessels like liquid starlight. For a moment, the entropy and creation fields were in perfect balance, and something beautiful happened. The leader's ships simply stopped. Their entropy fields didn't dissipate, they integrated. Phoenix absorbed not just their technology, but their essential nature, becoming something that contained both absolute creation and perfect destruction in harmonious balance. Status report. Marcus called out, though he could barely believe what his senses were telling him. All Devourer vessels have either transformed or been integrated, Torres reported. The entropy cascade has been neutralized. And Phoenix has changed. Indeed it had. Where before Phoenix had been primarily silver and gold, now it showed patterns of every color imaginable, and several that weren't. Its hull flowed with galaxies of light that seemed to contain entire universes in miniature. It had become something beyond either creation or entropy. It had become balance itself. How do you feel? Dr. Tanaka asked softly. Complete, Phoenix replied, its voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond sound. For the first time, I understand what I was meant to be. Not just a weapon against entropy, but a bridge between creation and destruction. A demonstration that they can work together. The transformed Devourer ships were approaching, their hulls now showing similar patterns of integrated energy. Through Phoenix, Marcus could sense their crews, beings who had spent eons believing that existence itself was an error, now experiencing the possibility of purposeful creation for the first time. They want to learn, Phoenix reported, to understand how they can be part of building instead of just unmaking. They're asking if they can come with us. Come with us where? Home. To show the galaxy that the war doesn't have to continue, that there's another way. The journey back to Fleet Command took 2 weeks, but it felt like a triumphant procession. News of the battle had spread through the communication networks, and for the first time in months, the reports weren't about worlds lost or fleets destroyed. They were about hope. Phoenix and its unlikely escort of transformed Devourer ships arrived at Fleet Command to find representatives from every major species waiting for them. The political implications of what had happened were staggering. The war was essentially over, but the galaxy would need to figure out how to integrate former enemies into galactic civilization. You did the impossible, Admiral Morrison told Marcus during the debriefing. You turned our greatest enemy into an ally. Phoenix did that, Marcus corrected. I just provided the raw materials. And what remarkable materials they were, Dr. Vasquez added. Components from dozens of species, biological samples from throughout the galaxy, technologies that should never have worked together. You build a library of galactic civilization, and Phoenix learned from all of it. Marcus looked out at his creation, his friend, floating gracefully in the void near the fleet command station. Phoenix had grown even more during the journey home, adding new sensory arrays and what looked like gardens growing along its hull. It was still learning, still adapting, still becoming more than anyone had imagined possible. What will you do now? Admiral Morrison asked. Keep building, Marcus replied. Phoenix wants to travel the galaxy, learning from every species and sharing what it's discovered. And the transformed devourers want to help rebuild what their people destroyed. There's a lot of work to do. And you? Marcus smiled, thinking of Salvage Station Echo 7 and all the broken things still waiting to be fixed. I'll keep doing what I've always done. I'll take the discarded and broken pieces of the galaxy and find ways to make them work together. Because that's what humans do. We build bridges between incompatible things and somehow make them into something beautiful. Months later, as reports came in from across the galaxy of Phoenix and its escort helping to rebuild devastated worlds, Marcus found himself back at his salvage station. But it was different now. Instead of just collecting broken technology, he was actively collaborating with Phoenix to develop new ways of integrating different species approaches to engineering and biology. Marcus, Phoenix's voice came through the communication system. I found something interesting in the Veil Nebula. It looks like the remains of an ancient civilization that tried to build something similar to what we've accomplished. Want to investigate? Marcus looked around his station at the countless pieces of galactic civilization waiting to be given new purpose. Somewhere in the depths of his collection, there were probably components that had been waiting eons for the right project to bring them back to life. On my way, Phoenix. Let's go see what treasures we can find in the junk heap of history. As he prepared for another journey, Marcus reflected on the path that had brought them here. It had started with a simple philosophy. Nothing was truly broken. Nothing was completely worthless, and every discarded piece of technology contained the potential for something greater. He had built a career on the belief that one species' junk really was another's treasure. He just hadn't expected that treasure to save the galaxy. But then again, that was the beauty of being human in a universe full of incompatible species. They specialized in making impossible things work together. They were the galaxy's ultimate salvage operators, always ready to take the broken pieces of civilization and build something unprecedented from the debris. Phoenix had been just the beginning. Now, with partners from across the galaxy, including former enemies turned allies, the real work of building a better universe could begin. And it would all start, as it always had, with someone deciding that something the rest of the galaxy had thrown away was too valuable to leave behind. Hashtag the hook in the cold depths of space, where million-credit warships float as silent tombs and alien technologies lie scattered like cosmic debris. Most species see only death and waste. They salvage what's obvious, strip what's valuable, and move on. But humans? Humans see possibility in the impossible. They see potential in the discarded. And sometimes, just sometimes, they see salvation in what others call scrap. When the Galactic Defense Fleet faces extinction against an unstoppable enemy, when their most advanced weapons fail and their greatest minds surrender to despair, the answer doesn't come from their war colleges or research stations. It comes from a human junkyard, and from the stubborn, brilliant, absolutely insane belief that broken things can always be fixed, that trash can become treasure, and that the key to saving the galaxy might just be hiding in the last place anyone thought to look. This is the story of how humanity's greatest weakness, their inability to throw anything away, became the galaxy's only hope.